Right after the Civil War, there was this incredible, hopeful moment, a real shot at racial equality in America. But that promise, it was shattered. So today, we're going to dig into how that progress wasn't just stopped in its tracks, it was actively, systematically reversed, how discrimination became the actual law of the land. So here's the big question, right? We know that Reconstruction, that period right after the Civil War, saw these amazing steps toward a more equal society. So how on earth did it all go so wrong? How did that momentum just stop and then get thrown into reverse, leading to this official, legal system of inequality? Okay, so where does this story even begin? Well, it all kicks off at a single pivotal moment, the end of Reconstruction. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some dry political shift. No, this was the trigger. It set off this domino effect, a whole cascade of events that would completely reshape the American South for generations to come. And this, right here, it shows you that chain reaction perfectly. It's really simple, but so powerful. First, the political will for Reconstruction just kind of fizzles out up north. And what happens then? The federal troops, and these guys were the main protectors of the rights of newly freed African Americans, they're pulled out. And boom, you've got a massive power vacuum. It just opened the door for the old political guard, the Democratic Party of that era, to sweep right back in and take control all across the South. All right, so what happens when this, new but really old political order gets back in power? What's the first thing on their to-do list? It wasn't about building something new. Nope, it was about tearing something down. And they didn't waste any time. Immediately, these new state governments got to work repealing every hard-won reform from Reconstruction. We're talking about laws that had set up public schools, protected voting rights, expanded civil liberties. All of it was just systematically dismantled. It's like the progress of the last 10 years was being erased, one law at a time. But here's the thing. Just getting rid of the old laws, that wasn't enough for them. The next step was to build something new, a brand new legal framework, one that was explicitly designed to write discrimination into the law books, to enforce a really rigid racial hierarchy. And this system, it would become known as Jim Crow. Now, let's be absolutely clear about what this was. Jim Crow, this wasn't just about people's attitudes or, social customs. No way. This was a formal, legal system. We're talking about actual state laws and local ordinances passed by governments to make racial discrimination the official policy. So what did that actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, it meant total racial segregation in every public space you can imagine. Schools, trains, restaurants, hospitals, you name it. It meant a whole toolkit of tactics to block access to the ballot box, things like poll taxes and literacy tests that were aimed squarely at stopping African Americans from voting. It even meant laws making it a crime for people of different races to marry. And maybe most importantly, it meant there was basically zero protection for the civil rights of African Americans. Okay, so you're probably thinking, how could a system like this, one that's so obviously against the whole idea of equality, possibly hold up in court? Could it really be considered constitutional? Well, everyone was wondering the same thing, and all eyes turned to the nation's highest court. And that moment of truth came with a huge landmark case, Plessy versus Ferguson. I mean, this was it. This one case was going to decide the fate of legal segregation in the U.S., and its outcome would cast a shadow for more than 50 years. And the decision? It was absolutely devastating. The Supreme Court affirmed segregation. They created this infamous doctrine of separate but equal. And what that meant was that segregation wasn't just some local or state issue anymore. The highest court in the land had given it their official stamp of approval. That gave Jim Crow the legal foundation it needed to just flourish. So now, with the law on their side, the big question became enforcement, right? How do you actually maintain such a rigid social and political order day in and day out? Well, the answer, tragically, wasn't found in the courtroom. It was found in intimidation and straight-up violence. This is when we see the Ku Klux Klan come roaring back, along with other similar nativist groups. And these organizations, they basically acted as the unofficial muscle, the extra-legal enforcement arm of the Jim Crow system. Their whole purpose was to use terror to crush any opposition and to keep that racial hierarchy firmly in place. And the direct result? A horrifying spike in violence against African Americans. And you have to understand, this violence wasn't random. It was systematic. It was a brutal tool used to enforce segregation, to punish anyone who dared to challenge the system, and to create this constant climate of fear.
So let's just recap the whole thing step by step. First, you have the political power shift when Reconstruction ends. That opens the door for discriminatory Jim Crow laws to be passed. Then the Supreme Court gives it a legal thumbs up. And finally, the whole system is held together by organized violence. It's a clear four-step path from a moment of promise to a full-blown policy of institutionalized racism.
And all of that, it brings us to one final, really important question. Eventually, the Jim Crow laws were overturned, right? But the institutions they built and the deep inequalities they cemented into our society, those things don't just vanish overnight. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the lasting legacy of these institutions today?